Hello, here we are. Episode 4, chapter 4. We are discussing loss and the mourning process is the name of the chapter, the title of the chapter from the Primal Wound. So Louise, what did you take the lead on this one?
Okay.
What do you think? What did you think?
Well, a lot stood out to me in this one. I don't know if it did for you, but I
A
thought
lot.
I actually maybe think this is the biggest chapter. So I thought chapter 2 was, but now I'm like, oh, this was big.
Yeah.
So a couple things right at the very beginning. There's always a quote at the beginning of these chapters, and I'll just I won't read the whole quote by Gilda France, but part of it is the etymology of the word mourn means to remember and stems from the same root as memory. And one part I thought was interesting at the end of her little quote is mourning and depression are other names of abandonment. We shared this. We always find this.
I
We can just
know.
read this together. Great minds think alike.
Yes.
On this podcast. So there's a whole part about this at the beginning where it talks about the need to mourn. And they used to just think babies were babies, and it depends. Some people come into the adoption process at 4 years old, 5 years old, they've been in foster care and orphanage. That's a whole nother ball game. But even little babies, they think now, it imprints on their psyches, that there's a death, a mourning. And I think the biggest thing that really stuck out for me in this was that there was when the baby's taken away, the baby's going through a depression and all the stages of grief of depression.
Yes.
And I thought, okay, so they're going through the whole upset, search around, then the acting out, baby's crying, can't be comforted, then the withdrawal, and the withdrawal often happens. And then they got into the adopted parents, which we never really think about this. This is sad for the adopted parents. The new mom's all excited to have her baby home and feels rejected by that baby.
I know. It had never occurred to me that piece of it, or that, and also we don't know, we were adopted as tiny babies. I don't know if my mom would remember. I might ask her how we reacted, that we went through those stages of grief. We wouldn't remember that necessarily, but maybe parents remember that or something.
Or parents think, oh, my baby's not really into me. Or, it's so important.
It's a natural human reaction, right?
Yes, our kids just loved us. And like other people would be kind of sad when the baby was, the grandparents would be like, oh, the baby just wants mommy.
Wants mommy. Yeah.
That I'm sure a lot of adopted mommies have been through. What the heck?
Yes.
It's just a little baby. Why aren't they so into me? I'm comforting it. But the thing is babies go through grief. And because they don't teach people this, or we didn't know this I think a few psychologists knew this, but not the general public knowing this, is that parents aren't armed for this. So they just feel rejected themselves. Then there becomes not always, there becomes a distance with the biological mom and the new baby.
The adopted mom and the new baby.
Oh, sorry. Yes. The adopted mom. Excuse me. And that is very interesting to me. I have a thing I wanted to name this chapter. I was going to call you and tell you ahead of time. Heisman. Okay. Because I do something called the Heisman. Everyone who watches football knows the Heisman Trophy is the arm out, right? So it's like, I do this to everybody in my life since I was a baby. Relationships, I do it to my husband, Bill. He calls me Heisman. So it's like I do the push away, even from a young age. And it talks about that in here. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Other adopted friends I have tell me the same thing. They don't like to be really touched so much, grabbed, hugged. Once you're close to someone, you can do that. But I don't like to be that. That's an interesting.
It's like this image of just,
yeah, and I did it to everybody as a baby, and I know it offended a lot of relatives. I think my parents were pretty cool because there was 5 years between my brother and I, and they're like, babies are all different, But I could see, what if my mom, Mary Lee, never had Will, my brother? She might be like, what? My baby doesn't do the things they're supposed to do right away. Because I know I was a self-soother. She definitely said I self-soothed. I wasn't really, and later I became a cuddler and all that. But they do say that takes time.
I did think it was interesting, the stages of grief that applying, the despair comes, and then
Yes.
it was really an enlightening chapter.
It was, because I think we don't think babies are people. We know they're people.
Right. It's like almost like we think of them as puppies or something,
Yes. When
in
do they
in a
become
way.
when does a baby become people? But they're actually
Yeah.
they're actually people with stages of grief. So I'm sure that
With high, with very deep levels of understanding, it's just not the ability to communicate that isn't there. So when you can't communicate, you assume there isn't
it's
higher
fascinating.
intelligence, I think.
I think that's what it is. It's fascinating.
There was something I thought, there is a fear, even after a child has become attached to the new mother, the experience which happens to adopted children, those who have suffered the loss of a parent through death, appears to be similar. There's a fear of further loss, the loss of another parent, either by death or desertion. This may be manifested as separation anxiety, but is often mistaken for a strong attachment.
Isn't that?
Yeah.
And the separation anxiety. Well, the leading into that, the part you just read gets into the place about that you and I talked about last week, that a child sometimes would rather have a death happen than an abandonment. I was like, okay, that's weird. Like, they can handle death. Like, if someone dies in your family,
it's final and there's no
no one chose to leave you.
Yes. Yes.
The whole this chapter has so many aha moments, just even for psychological development of children and beyond adoption. I was thinking, God, kids in war-torn countries, babies that have lost their parents tragically through a mother in childbirth. I mean, they must go through the exact same thing. It's a fascinating. I just thought it was fascinating. One other part that stood out for me, hold on, I'm going to try to find it quickly, was you take over, because I have to look.
Well,
I'm so sorry.
one thing that the thread that I thought was so interesting is about the physical symptoms that from the emotional trauma, the physical symptoms, and a lot of it being stomach issues, and that many adoptees have reported having.
Yes.
I don't remember having any of those. Doesn't mean I didn't, but I did think that when I got through all that, I was like, I don't know that I did, and I don't remember. But then I saw this beginning of this paragraph in my research: adoptees who acted out.
That's the part I was trying to find.
Had fewer physical symptoms than those who were compliant.
Yes.
This makes sense, since neurotic behavior seems to relieve the need for a somatic response. So that was like, oh, well, then that that made sense for me, because that's how I handled it, was just acting out like a.
That's actually interesting. That's the part. That's the part I found. I was like searching for a minute ago, because the also the acting out part is sort of the thing they touch on in this chapter. Is the child starts to find it, like they want to abandon first before they're abandoned. And that's always been a thing with me in relationships. I always broke up with somebody before they could hurt me, or if a friend was going to reject me, I'd walk away first, this kind of thing. And it's the same thing as what you're talking about. The acting out is like, I'm going to do this before. And the good girl thing, even though it's not the good girl, but the belonging thing comes up again in this chapter. And I was like, okay, this is all just so crazy.
I did like a similar thing where I would choose highly unavailable men that, so it was just inevitable what the conclusion would be, which was it's a flip side of the coin, but same thing.
Self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And it takes a long time to work through all these things and to not feel
It's an ever evolving, like I've said that before. I repeat myself in this podcast, but
we both do. But if you only listen to 1 or 2 episodes, you won't know that we
but that's not what we want. We want you to listen to all episodes
and go, gosh, they repeat themselves so much.
Like what?
No, it all stood out to me. I mean, I just thought there was so many aha moments. It's like I circled everything you circled, and the part about, and I wonder if there's studies of how they can figure out we should ask people if they remember any of this when they come on the show about being sick, or if they did the Heisman, the rejecting, or how they feel about abandonment now. That's my biggest fear. Is I actually always think I'm pretty secure. You always think I'm really secure. So, oh, I'm really secure and all these, until I feel like I might get abandoned. Then I am like not secure.
Then it's like,
oh, I'm the worst. Yeah. I even, yeah, that was good.
Any potential relationship, men in listening to this is like, they're going to run far away.
I think you should actually log on to our YouTube channel just to watch Sarah do that, because that was awesome. I'll do the Heisman. You do the.
I'll do the demon comes out.
Yeah.
I think for me, that's what has happened in the past. Is
you become the demon and I become the I do the I like when my husband and I go through anything and he's like, so, my husband's wonderful. He's pretty easygoing. I'll be like, you're not going to leave me. I go through this right. So you're not going to leave me. Right. He's like, what the? No, I was going to get milk. It's not. I mean, it's funny that it's just, I think, oh, I'm so secure. I can be on my own. I can do, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm not.
Yes.
It's a scary world.
What I find, what I'm excited, I think we went through this chapter pretty well, I think. Because you even brought, and then this was always, I think this was me for a long time. And it's in the very last paragraph, trying to avoid loss causes many adoptees to avoid intimate relationships.
Bing, 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 circle. So there you go. We've summed up Louise and Sarah's issues.
And then the next, what I find is the next, we're going into part 2. So I think it's going to get even more intense from here on
because
out.
it's what happens to the baby, then how it manifests into the person.
I'm holding off on reading. I haven't been reading the whole book just because I really want to be savoring it when we discuss it.
Me too. I found that that's better because I really delve into that chapter right before we have our podcast, as opposed to now what was it I read? I already know what's going to happen. Then you're bringing in things, so it's a fun journey, this whole thing.
It is. It's been really great. We've got quite a ways to go, so we're not going to run out of anything yet.
Yep.
And then now we move on to our guest.
Yay.